early 2017, in the city of Toronto, Canada, three young Chinese international students, Wang Haoji, 19, Fan Boqiao, 19, and Jiaqi, 18, became entangled in a tragic love triangle. In just one night, one of them was dead, one was charged with murder, and the third disappeared without a trace. The case sent shockwaves through the Chinese international student community, not only because of its violent nature, but also because all three individuals came from well-off families and were once seen as model students studying abroad. So what exactly happened between them? Let's dive into the story. At 1:30 a.m. on February 7, 2017, Toronto police received an emergency call reporting a violent altercation in the North York area. By 2 a.m., officers arrived at the hospital where the victim, Wang Haoji, was receiving emergency treatment. Authorities confirmed that two Chinese passport-holding international students had gotten into a serious physical fight. The incident had taken place in Haoji's rented home. Fan Boqiao, who assaulted the victim, was arrested at the scene on suspicion of aggravated assault. All involved parties were taken to the police station for questioning. Tragically, Haoji had sustained a traumatic brain injury and remained in a coma. Nearly 24 hours later, around 1 a.m. on February 8th, the hospital declared that the head injury was too severe, resuscitation efforts had failed, and there were no signs of life. Haoji, just 19 years old, had died from the altercation. Boqiao, also 19, confessed to the entire incident. As no weapons were involved, police confirmed that Haoji had been beaten to death with bare hands. Fan Boqiao was formally charged with second-degree murder. Investigators determined that the motive behind the fatal altercation was rooted in a love triangle. At the center of the conflict was 18-year-old Jiaqi, Haoji's ex-girlfriend and Boqiao's current partner, who was also present at the scene. Early reports indicated that Jiaqi had encouraged her current boyfriend to attack her ex, and possibly more than once. Moreover, there were signs that Jiaqi may not have fully ended her relationship with Haoji while she was dating Boqiao. So how did three promising young people from privileged backgrounds and polished public images end up at the center of such a tragic incident? Let's unpack the full story and delve into the truth about who Jiaqi really was. Wang Haoji was born in 1997 in Zhengzhou, Henan Province. His parents worked in international trade. In January 2015, shortly after graduating high school, his parents sent him to Canada to study at a language school. Living in Toronto, Haoji was known as a handsome young man with charming eyes and a warm smile. His friends described him as kind, sociable, and always courteous. With his good looks and generous personality, he built strong relationships with those around him. In August of his first year in Toronto, Haoji met a girl named Jiaqi at a gathering of international students. She was from Shantou, Guangdong, and attended a local private high school. Jiaqi was youthful and full of life. After a brief period of getting to know each other, the two developed feelings, and following Haoji's pursuit, officially became a couple. He poured his heart into his relationship with Jiaqi. His Weibo feed was almost entirely filled with snapshots of their daily dates, each post radiating his deep affection for her. In everyday life, Haoji treated her like a treasure, always trying to give her the best. He showered her with luxury gifts, including designer handbags, shoes, and accessories. But in reality, while Haoji's family was financially comfortable, they weren't wealthy, and their financial support was limited. Still, in the context of their relationship, he seemed to feel that the only way to express his love was through constant spending, and Jiaqi gladly accepted it. On her personal social media, Jiaqi frequently flaunted her expensive luxury items. When Haoji ran out of money, he would come up with excuses to ask his parents for more, just to keep up with daily expenses. His parents eventually noticed something was wrong. In March 2016, they asked him to sign a written pledge, promising not to spend money recklessly again. Unaware of this, Jiaqi continued her lifestyle, and in an effort to keep their relationship from growing cold, Haoji quietly cut corners in his own life. He rented a cheap apartment with 2 roommates and tried to save on every possible expense, all so he could continue spending on Jiaqi. Whether it was related to his frugal diet or not, his weight dropped dramatically, from nearly 400 pounds down to about 282 pounds. Keep in mind, he was 6 feet 4 inches tall. As his cash ran dry, he resorted to using credit cards. Eventually, he handed over his bank cards and credit cards, along with the pins, to Jiaqi. All 3 of his credit cards were maxed out by Jiaqi, who in return maintained her high-end lifestyle. By 2017, after 2 years of dating, Hyoji had spent roughly 100,000 Canadian dollars on her, an amount that essentially maxed out his financial capacity. Yet even that wasn't enough. Jiaqi, after nearly 2 years with him, still felt Hyoji didn't meet her financial standards. Her material desires gradually became insatiable until someone else entered the picture. Fan Boqiao, also 19, from Huizhou, Guangdong, was attending a private high school in Canada. His past Weibo posts revealed that he had several years of experience in Muay Thai and boxing and often portrayed himself as a fighter. In one post, he wrote, "I don't believe in any god or religion. I only believe in money and my fists." He also mentioned that boxing, to him, was about defeating the people you want to beat, destroying bullies or those who try to bully you, and protecting the ones you care about. At the time of these posts, he was still a minor, but it was already laying the foundation for the tragedy that would unfold years later. Boqiao was into bodybuilding. He had a muscular physique and was known for dressing sharply and taking care of his appearance. Despite his aggressive online persona, people who knew him described him as composed and not prone to emotional outbursts. But if a friend was hurt or upset, he was the type who would step in and stand up for them, no questions asked. 2 months before the incident, Boqiao and Jiaqi met and quickly became close. They frequently hung out and attended parties together. At that time, it was unclear whether Hyoji and Jiaqi had officially broken up, but based on how events unfolded, it appeared increasingly likely that Jiaqi had betrayed Hyoji. Boqiao also began spending lavishly on Jiaqi. When he ran out of money, it didn't matter. He repeatedly asked his parents for money under the pretense of paying for supplemental school fees, only to spend it all on Jiaqi, continuing to buy her luxury items. On February 6, 2017, Hyoji seemed to have realized the truth about her betrayal. At 3 p.m., he posted on social media, "I guess I finally see it clearly now. I was still thinking about what gift to get you for Valentine's Day on the 14th. This must be the best gift you've given me. Wishing you happiness." Later that night, Jiaqi brought Fan Boqiao to Wang Haoji's apartment. The 3 met face to face. Emotions ran high, as might be expected from 3 young people in a tense love triangle, and a fight quickly broke out. Thankfully, Haoji's roommate Eric intervened and managed to break them apart before things escalated further. Boqiao and Jiaqi then left. That should have been the end of it. But not long after leaving, Jiaqi texted Eric, saying she was still furious and wanted to hit Hyoji herself. Eric urged her to let it go and told them to head home. Around 10 minutes later, Jiaqi messaged again, claiming Boqiao had forgotten his car keys and a cigar in the apartment and needed to come back to retrieve them. Eric responded, "Don't come back in. I'll look for them and bring them out." But after searching thoroughly, he couldn't find either item. He told them, "Just head home for now. If I find them, I'll give them to you tomorrow." Jiaqi insisted that they had an urgent matter and would only come in to grab the items and leave right away. Eric remained cautious. He didn't want them to run into Hyoji again, fearing another confrontation. But Jiaqi seemed sincere and persistent, assuring him they'd be in and out quickly. Eric finally agreed, and they arranged to enter through the basement back door. Eric opened the door. Boqiao seemed calm and composed, so Eric let him in, expecting him to quickly retrieve the forgotten items and leave. He also blocked Jiaqi from entering with him, hoping to avoid another conflict. Moments later, Eric heard shouting from inside the apartment. He rushed in to find Boqiao had taken off his outer jacket and was straddling Hyoji, pinning him down by the neck with his knee, cursing and repeatedly punching him in the face. Haoji's face was covered in blood, and he could no longer fight back. His blood soaked into the couch as his body began to seize uncontrollably. Eric and another roommate, alarmed by the brutal scene, rushed to call an ambulance. But Jiaqi stopped them, saying, "His shirt is soaked in blood. How can we take him to the hospital like this?" Instead of rushing him to the emergency room, they wasted precious time trying to change Haoji's clothes. By the time they finally got him to the hospital early the next morning, it was too late. After hospital staff reported the incident to the police, officers arrived and took Boqiao into custody. As he was being placed into the police car, he shouted, "Take care of my girlfriend!" Haoji had missed the critical window for treatment. He ultimately died from a ruptured carotid artery and severe brain hemorrhaging. When the incident occurred, it may be more accurate to call it an assault rather than a mere altercation. There were no car keys or cigars in the apartment, as Boqiao and Jiaqi had claimed they were returning to retrieve. And while Boqiao may have seen Haoji as a romantic rival, it still seemed extreme for things to escalate into a fatal beating. Considering Boqiao's past Weibo posts, where he spoke of protecting the ones you care about, his actions that night fit that narrative disturbingly well. However, Wang Haoji had never harmed Jiaqi in any way. The only plausible explanation for such explosive rage would be if Jiaqi had fabricated a story, possibly portraying herself as a victim of abuse, and incited Boqiao to carry out a second attack. This would make the sequence of events more coherent, but there was no concrete evidence to support that claim. Initially, Boqiao was arrested, while Jiaqi faced no legal consequences. On February 8th, Haoji was officially declared dead. If the charge of second-degree murder against Boqiao held up in court, he would be looking at a potential life sentence in prison, with a minimum of 10 years served before becoming eligible for parole. After receiving notification from local police, the Chinese consulate in Toronto contacted the families of both international students. Haoji's immediate relatives traveled to Toronto, where they were presented with his body, a moment of unspeakable grief. Boqiao's family also flew to Canada without delay. Aware of the serious implications of a second-degree murder conviction, they acted swiftly and hired one of Canada's top defense attorneys, Brian H. Greenspan, whose fees reportedly reached 1,000 Canadian dollars per hour. Over time, the strong emotional and financial support of Boqiao's parents became increasingly evident. According to online sources, Boqiao's father was a branch director at a bank in Dongguan, Guangdong. While this detail couldn't be independently verified, the family's wealth was undeniable. Over the next several months, the case went through multiple court hearings. Boqiao presented his own account of what had happened, which differed significantly from the testimony of the key witness, Eric. According to Boqiao, after the initial altercation and leaving the apartment, Jiaqi was visibly upset. He admitted he was also angry at the insults Haoji had directed at Jiaqi. He claimed he only returned to retrieve a forgotten car key and cigar, but was suddenly attacked by Haoji, who grabbed his hair and shoved him onto the couch. Boqiao insisted he fought back purely in self-defense and had no intention of escalating the fight. However, one crucial detail raised suspicion. Boqiao had removed his jacket before re-entering the apartment. He explained this by saying it was simply too hot inside, and he took it off as soon as he entered, not as a prelude to a planned fight. Another witness, a friend of Haoji, testified that he had been on the phone with Haoji when the confrontation occurred. He claimed he heard someone shout, "I'll kill you," or "kill me then," though he couldn't identify who said it. This could have been a critical clue to understanding the emotional state of those involved, but due to the ambiguity, it wasn't conclusive. Further complicating matters, the two roommates who were present at the scene said they hadn't heard any such shouting. As a result, the witness statements were inconsistent, leaving the jury with the difficult task of carefully weighing all the evidence. Boqiao's attorney argued that his client had no intent to kill, and that the entire incident was nothing more than a tragic accident. He emphasized that the physical altercation lasted less than 10 seconds and involved only 3 or 4 punches, not a premeditated attack, which at most amounted to manslaughter, not second-degree murder. During this time, Boqiao remained in a detention facility. His lawyer made it clear that he would push for bail, citing the Canadian justice system's presumption of innocence, meaning a defendant is considered innocent until proven guilty. While law enforcement has the authority to arrest and detain suspects, a defendant may be released on bail if the defense presents sufficient reasons and meets the court's conditions. In Canadian law, bail is typically evaluated based on three main criteria. First, whether the accused is likely to appear in court if released. Second, whether the accused poses a threat to public safety. Third, whether the release would undermine public confidence in the justice system. While the first two conditions can often be managed through legal means, it's the third, public sentiment, that often determines whether bail is granted. In cases involving widespread public outrage or ethnic tensions, judges tend to exercise extreme caution when considering bail. In this case, however, the incident was relatively isolated within the Chinese international student community. Most people outside of that circle were unaware of the case's details, and the overall public impact was minimal. This played in favor of the defense. Haoji's family, being foreign nationals without local influence or media connections, were unable to organize any large-scale protests or public demonstrations. Had even a few dozen people gathered outside the courthouse with signs, the case might have received broader media attention, reflecting what the legal system refers to as public sentiment. This often occurs in high-profile cases or those involving serious crimes or ethnic conflict, where the court is more sensitive to public opinion. Recognizing the limited public impact, Boqiao's legal team capitalized on the situation. 3 months after the incident, and after 5 postponed hearings, Boqiao was granted bail. The bail amount was extraordinarily high, 3.75 million Canadian dollars, but his parents paid it without hesitation, securing his release. Although Boqiao was placed under electronic monitoring and had his movements restricted, his parents arranged for him to live in a luxury home valued at over 200,000 Canadian dollars. He was also allowed to resume his studies while awaiting trial. The case stretched on for another 2 years with multiple court sessions. On October 30th, 2019, the final trial was held. A jury of 12 deliberated on the case for a full month. Ultimately, none of the evidence could definitively prove whether Fan Boqiao had initiated the attack with the intent to kill or if it had been a case of lawful self-defense. After careful deliberation, the jury reached a middle ground. They did not fully accept Boqiao's claim of self-defense, but neither did they believe the prosecution had proven premeditated intent. In the end, they concluded that Boqiao had caused Haoji's death unintentionally and found him guilty of manslaughter. This meant the jury had reduced the severity of the charges against Boqiao. Once the charge of manslaughter was established, the judge sentenced him to 5 years in prison. Considering the case began in 2017 and the final verdict was reached in 2019, 2 years had already passed. With time served, Boqiao would only need to serve 1 more year before becoming eligible for parole, after which he would be deported back to China to begin a new chapter of his life. In court, Boqiao expressed remorse. "I deeply regret stepping into Haoji's apartment that day. We were all too young. When it comes to Haoji's death, I don't even know what to say. I don't know how to make up for what happened. I will carry this guilt for the rest of my life." Faced with this outcome, Haoji's family was devastated. While they had no choice but to accept the court's decision, they made it clear that they would never accept Boqiao's apology and were actively seeking ways to hold Jiaqi accountable as well. The tragedy stemmed from a love triangle. Boqiao and Haoji didn't even know each other before that day. They had no personal conflict. It was simply because they were Jiaqi's current and former boyfriends that this fatal confrontation occurred. In the end, one died, one was imprisoned, while Jiaqi, the catalyst and alleged instigator, was never charged and remained free. After the incident, Jiaqi reportedly returned to China and vanished from public view. She deleted all her contacts on WeChat, disconnected her phone number, deactivated her Weibo account, and wiped her Instagram account, which she once used to flaunt her lavish lifestyle. Online users began digging into her past and found this wasn't the first time she'd been involved in such drama. Jiaqi had studied in Singapore since the 8th grade after leaving Shantou. She worked as a shopping agent and was known to date multiple men, often engaging in infidelity. Several acquaintances came forward, revealing that Jiaqi had repeatedly manipulated her boyfriends, pitting them against one another and sparking violent altercations. Some ended up arrested or took the fall, while she always managed to walk away unscathed. After the 2017 incident, one young man even contacted Haoji's family, admitting that he had once been provoked by Jiaqi into attacking her ex-boyfriend. Fortunately, that fight didn't lead to tragedy, but he was banned from entering Singapore afterward. Her personal life was reportedly chaotic. While living in Toronto, her goal was clear: find a wealthy, good-looking boyfriend from a well-off family. In the end, it's believed that Jiaqi changed her name and disappeared. And perhaps on some quiet night, she secretly searches the internet for stories about her past, quietly relieved that she got away when she did. The case closed with many unanswered questions, leaving a permanent scar on the victim's family and serving as a sobering reminder of how unchecked emotions, manipulation, and misplaced trust can lead to devastating consequences. That's the end of our first case. Now let's move on to case number 2. This case centers around a young woman who became famous on TikTok, but that fame would ultimately lead to a tragic end. At just 22 years old, she rose to online stardom through a viral short video. But was her sudden popularity a blessing or a curse? At 8:58 p.m. on August 1st, 2018, near the New City shopping mall in Jiaqi, Zhejiang province, a horrifying event unfolded. A 22-year-old woman named Chen was brutally stabbed multiple times inside a store, left lying in a pool of blood. Her attacker was none other than her ex-boyfriend Wu Yidong, who had broken up with her not long before. He cornered her and launched a deadly knife attack. The incident happened suddenly and lasted less than 3 minutes. After the stabbing, Yidong fled the scene. Chen Minju died on the spot. The area quickly descended into chaos, and news of the murder in such a busy downtown district spread rapidly online. The tragedy gained even more attention when it was revealed that Minju had nearly 400,000 followers on TikTok, where she was known for her dance videos and beauty-focused content. Hashtags like "murder after breakup" and "TikTok influencer killed" quickly went viral, fueling public outrage. But behind the headlines was a more painful truth. Chen Minju was never seeking fame. Her popularity came unintentionally, and it later exposed her to harsh, baseless criticism. Even now, many people still misunderstand what really happened and unfairly judge her. So what is the real story behind this tragedy? Minju was born in 1996 into a well-off family that owned a textile factory. After graduating from Hangzhou Normal University, she began working as a kindergarten teacher in Jiaqi in September 2015. Soon after, her family bought her a 2-bedroom apartment near her workplace, fully paid for. With a background in dance, she joined a professional dance teacher training program in 2017 and also taught at various schools. Her monthly income exceeded 10,000 yuan. After starting her career, she stopped asking her parents for money, though they still gifted her a Mercedes to make commuting easier. In fact, when she turned 18, her family spent 900,000 yuan to build a 2-story home for her future marriage. Her parents hoped that if her future partner had an average or unstable job, they could still support the couple by helping them open a business back in their hometown. With her family's wealth and her own stable career, Minju's future should have been bright and secure. The only missing piece was finding the right partner. Her family didn't have high expectations for a son-in-law. He didn't need to be rich. They only hoped he'd have good character, a strong work ethic, and treat Minju well. Compared to these qualities, money was secondary. In early 2017, near the Jiaqi Youth Cultural Center, Minju crossed paths with Wu Yidong, who happened to be walking his pet cat. Being an animal lover, she approached him to play with the cat for a while. And just like that, 2 strangers who had never met before were suddenly connected. Yidong was 5 years older than Chen Minju. Both were locals of Jiaqi, but Yidong came from a much more modest background. His parents spent most of their time in Inner Mongolia, keeping bees, and he had been raised by his grandmother. He studied culinary arts at a vocational school, but after graduation he spent several years selling clothes. Some might call that the early phase of entrepreneurship, but in reality, he didn't have a steady job, and eventually, he stopped working altogether. Yidong pursued Minju with intensity, and in time, she was moved by his efforts and agreed to date him. In the beginning, their relationship seemed smooth, but it wasn't long enough for her to fully understand his character or personal background. Minju also kept the relationship secret from her parents, confiding only in her sister-in-law about Yidong. At the end of 2017, Minju's parents met Wu Yidong for the first time, although it was an unplanned encounter. They had come into town for a hospital visit and decided to stop by their daughter's apartment. Using their spare key, they entered and found Yidong still asleep in bed. At 10 a.m. He made a decent first impression, being tall and lean, but when he slowly got out of bed, he said nothing and simply shut the bedroom door behind him. The parents stayed until 11 a.m., hoping to talk, and eventually had to knock to wake Yidong again. Minju's mother didn't want to pressure him, so she refrained from asking personal questions and simply mentioned they weren't looking for anything extravagant in a son-in-law, just someone with a stable job who would treat their daughter well. Still, Yidong remained silent for most of the visit. Even as they left, he barely said a word. As time went on and the couple experienced more of life together, cracks began to show. Their differences in upbringing, personality, and values became more apparent, leading to frequent arguments over trivial matters. However, early on, Minju didn't take these issues seriously. Yidong hadn't done anything outrageous after all. During their first Lunar New Year together, Yidong's parents returned to Jiaqi from Inner Mongolia. Minju, without telling her own family, visited his home. His parents were clearly delighted by her and gave her a red envelope and welcome gift totaling 11,000 yuan. Minju's parents were uncomfortable with this, feeling it was too much given that the couple was only dating, and they urged her to return the money. But Yidong's family insisted she keep it. With their relationship now public, both to their families and on social media, the fighting only escalated. They argued constantly. To Minju, Yidong lacked two of the most basic qualities she valued in a man: kindness and ambition. She later told her mother that they argued all the time, and that Yidong often gambled on his phone and occasionally went out to play mahjong. However, she never mentioned him being physically abusive. One day, while cleaning her daughter's belongings, Minju's mother discovered a handwritten note from Yidong that read, "I promise to hit you less this year." From that moment on, the Chen family no longer accepted either the relationship or Yidong as a person. The couple's arguments had grown intense, and Minju had talked about breaking up several times. But each time she brought it up, Yidong's extreme and unstable personality surfaced. In February 2018, the Chen family received an urgent call from Minju. She said her car had been blocked by Yidong, who took her keys. When they arrived, they found that the Mercedes display screen had been smashed by Minju's own iPhone, and the car itself had been damaged. The matter was taken to the police. Yidong then demanded that Minju return half of the 10,000 plus RMB his parents had gifted her. However, in reality, Yidong had spent most of that money himself, and the rest had been used jointly. In the end, his parents declined to take any of the money back. In May 2018, following another argument, Wu Yidong hired a locksmith to break into Minju's apartment and stole her clothes, student ID, passport, and other personal belongings. Once again, the situation ended up at the police station. After each breakup, Yidong would go into full emotional meltdown, crying, begging for forgiveness, kneeling, even filming apology videos and sending them to Minju. He did everything he could to win her back. Minju, unable to firmly reject others and still holding on to hope that he might change, forgave him multiple times. Despite her family's strong objections, they reluctantly accepted the relationship, hoping that perhaps Yidong might truly change and treat her well in the future. On May 26, 2018, the couple traveled to Hangzhou and had what seemed like a joyful trip. Yidong filmed a short TikTok video of Minju dancing on a boat in West Lake using a popular song as the background music. He uploaded it directly to his own TikTok account. To their surprise, the video went viral, earning over 1.8 million likes. The sudden surge of attention went straight to Yidong's head. He saw an opportunity for fame and money. He coaxed and pressured Minju into making more content. In just 1 month, 59 TikTok videos were uploaded, mostly dance clips featuring Minju, and they attracted more than 380,000 followers. However, the couple had completely different views on this sudden rise in popularity. Minju saw TikTok as just a fun hobby and had no intention of turning it into a career. Yidong, on the other hand, believed he had found a golden opportunity to get rich. He threw himself into growing the TikTok account, chasing more views and sponsorships. Their differences quickly deepened. Minju confided in friends that Yidong had become obsessed, treating TikTok like it was his entire life. Meanwhile, Yidong kept pushing her. "I've already lined up a few ad deals. Each pays 3,000 yuan. Are you filming or not?" Chen Minju remained firm. She refused to film any more videos. After that, she began to distance herself from the relationship. As expected, Wu Yidong's extreme personality resurfaced. Around 1 a.m. on June 20th, Minju's brother received a panicked phone call from her. She was crying and told him that Yidong had transferred 10,000 RMB from her phone without permission, kicked and damaged her car door, then fled the scene. Minju's mother became deeply concerned. She sensed that Wu Yidong was not just toxic, but dangerous. Fearing her daughter might be harmed, she came up with a plan. Since the couple hadn't officially broken up yet, she told Minju that her apartment in the city would be sold and upgraded to a bigger one. She encouraged Minju to temporarily move back home. At the end of June, Minju returned to her hometown, and from that point on, her parents personally drove her to and from work each day for safety. On July 12th, Minju officially broke up with Wu Yidong. Predictably, he launched into another emotional outburst. He spammed her with messages and calls, all of which she ignored. Then, in a disturbing turn, he began sending her videos of himself abusing her beloved dog, saying if the dog died, it would be her fault. Although he had originally gifted her the dog, she had returned it to him after the breakup. They met one final time. Minju paid 2,800 RMB to buy the dog back. She also transferred 11,000 RMB to Yidong's cousin, asking them to return the money to his parents. Still, Yidong refused to let go. He continued contacting Minju, begging to reconcile, calling, messaging on WeChat, and commenting on her Weibo posts. Even after being blocked on every platform, he changed phone numbers over 50 times just to reach her. He began stalking her workplace and following her after work. Fortunately, because her mother always picked her up, he couldn't get close. But he even went so far as to send her threatening texts at midnight, saying he would climb up to her second-floor bedroom window. On July 25, 2018, Yidong vandalized her Mercedes while she was at work, breaking off the emblem and scratching the body of the car. Minju reported it to the police. The damages were valued at over 10,000 RMB. From that point on, Yidong's behavior became increasingly deranged. On the morning of August 1st, 2018, he texted her, trying to set up a meeting. She ignored him. That afternoon, he sent another message, this time threatening to kill her. That evening, Minju told her mother she was going to the movies with friends and didn't need a ride home. After work, she got into a co-worker's sedan and headed to New City in Sixi. Yidong, who had been lurking outside her workplace, saw her leave and followed in his car. At 8:58 p.m., Minju entered a convenience store in New City. Yidong, wearing a face mask and concealing a knife in his jacket, followed her inside. He cornered her near a claw machine, pulled out the knife, and brutally attacked her, stabbing her dozens of times in cold blood. The store owner managed to hit Yidong in the head with a mop, but he escaped, leaving a chaotic scene behind. Over an hour later, Minju's mother was still desperately trying to call her daughter to make sure she was okay. But the unthinkable had already happened. Minju's young life ended forever at just 22 years old. After the murder, knowing he couldn't escape justice, Wu Yidong turned himself into the police and confessed to the crime. However, once news of the case spread online, many internet users revealed their cruel and immoral sides. Instead of focusing on the brutal nature of the murder or the victim's suffering, people began spreading false rumors just to gain clicks and attention. They accused the young woman of cheating, spending all of her boyfriend's money, then dumping him for a wealthier man. Comments like, "Internet celebrities deserve to die," and "No pain comes without reason," flooded the platforms. Even after death, Chen Minju was subjected to all kinds of public humiliation. Wherever there were rumors, there were people willing to amplify them, cutting deeper than any knife, piercing the hearts of her grieving family. 8 months after the incident, on April 3, 2019, the Jiaqi court held a public trial for Wu Yidong's premeditated murder. The key issue debated between the prosecution and the defense was whether the murder was planned in advance and whether his surrender should qualify as a mitigating factor. By that point, Wu had even gained weight in detention. In court, he claimed he had only wanted to reconcile with Minju, but she refused and even called security. He said he acted out in a moment of rage because he didn't want her calling for help. He even implied that if her mother had picked her up that night, she would still be alive. That heartless remark caused Minju's mother to faint in court. Wu's father submitted psychiatric records from a standard outpatient visit and a prescription from a doctor, clearly an attempt to plead for leniency on mental health grounds. But the visit had taken place only 4 days before the murder, suggesting it was premeditated and intended to build a legal defense. Combined with the fact that Wu had bought a mask specifically for the attack and had sent threatening messages, there was overwhelming evidence that the murder was planned. After multiple rounds of arguments, Wu finally addressed the court. He apologized to both families and said, "Everyone thinks a death sentence is the best punishment, but in reality, letting me live would be far worse. I'll live the rest of my life in torment. If I am sentenced to death, I hope my organs can be donated so I can atone in some small way." The hearing ended without a verdict announced at that time. On the afternoon of May 30th, 2019, the Ningbo Intermediate People's Court issued its verdict via video. Wu Yidong had deliberately and unlawfully taken another person's life. His motives were vile, his actions brutal, the circumstances egregious, and the consequences devastating. His surrender was not sufficient to warrant leniency. For the crime of premeditated murder, Wu was sentenced to death and permanently stripped of his political rights. He refused to accept the verdict and filed an appeal, trying to delay his fate. On December 31st, 2019, his own birthday, the appellate court held the hearing. Wu admitted to being an unfilial son and begged for his life, saying his existence wasn't his alone and that he hoped the court would spare him for his mother's sake. But his words were meaningless in the face of the cruelty of his actions. The appeal was rejected and the original sentence upheld. On August 31st, 2020, after approval by the Supreme People's Court, Wu Yidong's death sentence was officially carried out. And yet, the public outrage remained far from over. On the night of Wu Yidong's execution, a car carrying his relatives drove to the home of the victim, Chen Minju. They laid on the horn repeatedly, then shouted, "The whole family is here. Get out here now! Tonight we'll kill every last one of you!" Terrified, the Chen family immediately called the police. By the time officers arrived, the killer's family had already fled the scene, faster than stray dogs. To ensure the Chen family's safety, the police deployed personnel to guard the perimeter of their home and prevent any possible escalation. But the next day, September 1st, they returned, this time in larger numbers with several dozen people. Feeling emboldened by their crowd, they no longer feared the police. At one point, they even mocked the officers, saying things like, "I'll pretend to be a big bad wolf today, just so the Chen family knows we're watching." Leading the group was Wu Yidong's father, who brought along 2 of his brothers, chanting together, "The 3 of us stand as one." Eventually, This loosely organized mob was rounded up and escorted away by law enforcement. Before leaving, they threatened, "We'll be back. Now that his son is gone, no one in your family will ever live in peace." The police issued strict warnings and surveillance, and after that, the Wu family ceased any further aggressive behavior. It was clear that the Wu family's worldview was severely warped, unable to distinguish right from wrong, blatantly disrespecting the law, lacking boundaries, and completely void of conscience. Their actions made it easy to understand how Wu Yidong ended up becoming a cold-blooded killer. Growing up in such a self-centered, indulgent, and morally twisted environment, it was almost inevitable for him to develop a toxic sense of entitlement. People like him refuse to reflect on themselves, have zero empathy, and shamelessly expect others to accommodate their demands. Their mindset is simple. If you don't give me what I want, you're against me. Either submit to me, or I'll find a way to destroy you. This is a textbook example of an extreme and dangerous personality, what criminal psychology classifies as a high-risk personality type. When compounded with other triggers, it can lead a person to completely lose their sense of self. Wu Yidong exhibited all of these traits. Hopefully, this case helps you recognize red flags and dangerous personalities around you in everyday life. And finally, a word of caution. Reality is complex, and each situation needs to be judged based on context. It's important to consider multiple factors when evaluating whether someone is truly worth engaging with. Be observant, trust your judgment, and quietly distance yourself when needed. That wraps up this episode. If you've made it to the end, don't forget to like and subscribe. Take care, and see you next time. You.